What part of working with kids do you enjoy the most?
I think the best part about being in a classroom is to be able to engage with young children, and the way they think is just amazing. I mean, there are so many things as adults that we don't think about, and children can notice those small, small details and tell you. And it's really fascinating to be part of a classroom that way.
Okay. So is it something that came to you naturally, this whole thing of wanting to intervene in education, or are you unlike most mothers who say that the teacher knows best?
So, in fact, I started my career in software, and I was in a software
Okay.
firm for about 6 months. Although
Okay.
I have a background in biotechnology, I sat for the campus placements. I went ahead with a software job, and by the end of the 6th month, I knew this was not something I really wanted. I wanted to be in the presence of people. I wanted to be some in a space where there's a lot of communication, creativity, and where there's face to face interaction more. So that's when one of my neighbors, who's been a teacher for 25 years, she's like, Anusha, why don't you try teaching? Because I was all of 22 then, very young and beginning of my career. I'm like, okay, sounds exciting, but I'm not, I haven't done a qualification in teaching. Do you think I'm ready for it? She's like, as long as you have the passion, if you're able to connect with the audience, and if you're creative enough, you can be there. I said, okay, let me give it a shot. And that's how my career in teaching started by chance. And then once I took the dive, there was no looking back. So for the last 16, 17 years, I've been in teaching and I'm really enjoying it.
Wonderful, Anusha. Anusha Padmanabhan is into educational leadership. She's one of those people who doesn't sit idly by and wait for the world to change. She believes in starting some of those changes within the realm of what she understands and what she can do. So, what she's been doing is working with children to help them understand what their own capabilities are. And she's been mentoring and working with teachers to see how educational methods and pedagogy can change. It's a long, slow process. But the great part is that she's also involved with identifying what children are good at and helping them realize what they can probably excel at. So let me bring Anusha onto the show and welcome her. Anusha, great to have you on the show.
Thank you, Venu. Thank you so much. Such a lovely, bright day today.
Yeah. So, do you remember some of your first interventions, your first tentative sort of things that you did, or what was it that you started out with?
Yeah, Venu, I have a very interesting story to share. So, I started my career working for a American international school in Chennai. It's a small
Okay.
progressive school in Chennai, and my first class was with a bunch of ninth and tenth graders, teaching
Hmm.
them biology, and I had to do a lesson on the digestive system. So I went up there. I mean, I've seen my mentors, my teachers, all of them work. So I went up there. I grabbed a chalk. I started writing on the board. I started to talk to them about, okay, so when you eat, where do the different nutrients get digested in your body? And then the class got over. But something kept, nagging inside me that I could have done better because I was the only one talking and I wasn't sure if my learners understood what I said because I didn't really check on them, collectively. So the next day, I told all the children, why don't you all, carry your lunch to the classroom because the children always used to eat in the ground. So I said, carry all your lunch to the classroom. If possible, if most of you can get a sandwich, it'd be great. I'll also make sandwiches and bring, or else whatever is comfortable for your moms to make in the morning, it's absolutely fine. So when the children came to the classroom, we had the lunch together, and the session went like this. So I asked them, okay, so You're holding a sandwich, you have bread on top, you have some kind of stuffing inside, either paneer or cheese, vegetables and all of that. Where do you think these different components are digested in your system? And that sparked a wonderful conversation in the class. And children were like, these have carbs, so carbs get digested when you chew, and these are proteins, the cheese and the paneer and all of that. The veggies have minerals and vitamins. So they sort of knew where each component of their lunch was getting digested in their alimentary canal. And that was the beginning of activity based learning for me.
Okay. Which is a wonderful place to begin, because that very term, activity based learning, because a whole lot of it is rote learning, at least what passes for learning in our schools. It's the teacher will dictate and the students will absorb or memorize, and then they're expected to just say things whether they understand it or not. But are you able to function within the so-called limits of the education system? What did you have to do in order to make this more methodical?
Yeah, so something that worked for me. So, what over the years, what I realized is now activity based education need not mean completely converting the entire curriculum and the system that is in front of you. How you're able to create those aha moments in the classroom for the children. It could be something where you use it to wrap up the lesson, where you're assessing them informally. It could be part of the learning process where they are comprehending, or it could just be like you take a lesson and instead of usually doing it the rote way where you're doing question answers, fill in the blanks, and all of that, instead assign them to a project that they could work on. I mean, there are various ways in which you can actually incorporate activities into your classroom. You don't need to think very differently from your existing lesson plans. It's how you incorporate them in small small pockets, so that your whatever goals that you're achieving are achievable and you're able to see your wins immediately. So
Mm.
there are about 8 different ways that I strongly believe that you could, as a classroom teacher, bring in activity based learning. The first thing is hands on experimentation.
Okay.
So, for example, I had a class, a bunch of 10, 11-year olds learning about oil spills in the class. All I had
Mm.
to do is grab a aluminum foil, pour water, put some oil on top. We picked cotton and then we started to use it on top of the oil. And the children were able to visually observe how oil spills can be cleaned. Of course, at the ocean level, there are so many techniques. But the minute you see it visually, you sort of understand how oil can be removed. And also, when we put in a little bit of toys inside, fishes and turtles and all of that, they could see how the oil got stuck to the surface of the toy, and there was so much of conversation around it. I mean, this was a very small
Mm.
experience, right, in the classroom, but it made a
Right.
lot of difference in their learning. Now, the second way is what I told earlier, project based learning. So, there was a class, a primary class that was learning about types of leaves in the science classroom. So, all we did was we got down the stairs in the school, went around the school, picked up leaves from different plants, fallen leaves, the ones that are almost dry, the ones that are fresh, and we got it all to the classroom. And children were able to observe instead of looking at it in a PPT, instead of me drawing on the board, instead of them looking at a textbook, they were observing leaves in the classroom, and the kids made a nice scrapbook out of it. Some of them even made greeting cards. How they do that? They press the leaves and they make cards, right? So it was very exciting for the kids, and they never forget that learning. They remember all the types of those leaves. Then the third type of learning is through collaborative learning techniques. Now, collaboration is a very often used word in education, especially the three C's:
Right.
critical thinking, collaboration, and creativity. So, there are certain techniques in education that can be used inside a classroom where it invokes better understanding of the subject. One such example is probably in history. So we had a lesson where we learned about the Roman civilization, and children were learning how there are so many achievements the Romans have, done throughout their rule in the textbook. But then to visually see what they've done and to be able to add perspective to that, they were not given a chance for that. So what we did the next day is immediately we took printouts of different kinds of achievements. Could be a helmet, could be the road, could be any of the Roman achievements. Put it around the class like a gallery. So this technique was called a gallery walk. So all the kids came in and we sort of paired kids into groups of two or they were groups of three, and they would walk to every single picture, write their opinion about whatever they felt about that picture, move to the next one. So the class sort of rotated around, all the pictures. And finally, when you came back to the original picture, you had a wealth of ideas. And it's not just me talking and saying, hey, the Romans were responsible for this and this is how they achieved. But there were ideas from everybody. And even the quiet ones were able to, contribute to this because they were not asked to speak. They were asked to jot down their ideas under a picture. So this is one example of collaborative learning. Then the fourth one is how you use building and construction in your classroom. Now, Lego and blocks are available in plenty everywhere. Jenga blocks, Lego blocks, so many varieties. There are pipe-like blocks and all of that. So with the little ones, we did an activity where we were mapping the neighborhood. They were learning about their neighborhood, and they would just tell me, hey, there's this grocery store here, there's a doctor's clinic here, there's a temple there, and I walk on the road, there's an iron lady and I wave to her, and all kinds of exciting things that children notice that we don't, right? So I said, okay, why not just pull the blocks? So I went to the kindergarten department. I said, hey, can I just borrow your box of blocks? Because they use a lot of blocks there, the Jenga and blocks and all of that. I said, come, let's
Yes.
create your neighborhood. So again, children were given all of this and they sort of created their neighborhood. They could visually see this is the first way to actually learn mapping. We are usually used to, drawing things on a map, an India map and marking and things like that. But then to visually see your neighborhood, which is the first form of mapping, to know and to be aware of what is around you, this was a fantastic, project for them to do. The fifth form is sensorial learning. Now, how do you use your five senses to do activities in the class? There was a chapter on layers of the atmosphere. Now, there are certain
Okay.
topics which you just need to imagine. I mean, you're not going to go up in a rocket and look at all the four layers or five layers and come. So all we did was we took some Play-Doh, went to the chemistry lab and borrowed those 1 liter cylinders, those sleek cylinders, measuring cylinders, and we said, hey, let's just equate, the markings on the cylinder and try and, make the layers of the atmosphere with Play-Doh. And you can visually see which layer is at what height. That was a fantastic learning for the children. And the seventh thing that I want to talk about is board games. In one of
Okay.
our classrooms, this actually came from a child, it didn't come from me. So the child was talking to me about snakes and ladders. He's like, I love playing snakes and ladders, auntie. And last, during the weekend, my parents and I, we played a game and I won this and I did that and all of that. And it was a class on multiplication. I suddenly thought, okay, I'm sure children love board games. Why not create one in paper? So I went back to the staff room, quickly took out my chart and crayons and all of it, created one snake and ladder kind of, like a spin-off, where there were multiplication tables at every step. So I didn't do 1 to
Okay.
100 on a square. I did 1 to 20 and 6 into 4, 7 into 2, and simple multiplication tables. Went back to the class the next day. I took copies of it. I said, hey, I'll pair you guys of groups of 3. You can start playing the game. And they never forgot their tables after that, instead of just asking them to memorize and say. Yeah. And the last one I'd say,
Wonderful.
movement based. Children love movement. Nowadays you're just sitting in the class and you're observing, and young children need to move. They need to use their body, right? So there was a class on prepositions. Now, prepositions, you give a worksheet, you write on the board, you show some pictures, usually of a cat. I always say this, there's a cat sitting on top of the table, under the table, next to the table, and all of that. I said, why don't we be a cat for a day? Yeah. So they all became cats in the classroom. I said, no, under the table, and everybody will go hiding under the table. On the chair, and everybody would stand on the chair. So we used prepositions and moved a bit in the classroom, and that really helped. So these are 8 different ways in which any educator can use the resources available to transform play in the classroom.
You know what struck me the most, Anusha, about everything that you said so far? You have moved away from screens into interaction. What today's world, screen based interaction is what people talk about in education. But you're
Correct.
making this about social interaction, about real world interaction. So whether it is project based or it's sensorial based, it's about understanding it not just with the eyes and concentrating or clicking something, but actually interacting with my friends, with people in class, and the nature of collaboration itself changes. Whereas the other thing is basically about copying down things that have already been worked out. And I'm surprised
Correct.
that so much of work is put into trying the animation better when what we should be doing is exactly what you just said, which is improving collaboration and interaction between students. Because all learning ultimately is social, because it's not as if you get to learn simply because you read something that you understand. You interact with people, you play it out in the real world, and that's where the whole thing happens. But tell me, what was your childhood like? Who were the teachers who sort of I can see that some teachers have had an influence, or maybe you had it in you. What was your school life like?
Yeah. When I went to school, there were two teachers who inspired me a lot. One was my history teacher, the other was my
Okay.
biology teacher. And till date, I don't forget the way they teach about biology or history. Because when
Okay.
she taught me history in school, she would talk about it with so much passion and give us anecdotes about these. See, when we think of history, we only think of the past. As children, we don't think that there are some remnants of history around us always. So this teacher used to go
Right.
back and forth and create those real world connections, and that made a lot of difference, to relate to it, to know that okay, there is some bit of history in my city, in my country, that I can actually visit and learn about. And the second was my biology teacher. She would make biology come alive like that. I think it was her body language, the way she treated the children, the way she made sure that every child got a chance to participate in the class and to answer her questions. That really struck a chord. So these were two teachers who were very inspiring and teachers who I remember from my childhood. Apart from that, I think in adulthood, I've had fantastic mentors and teachers who I've worked with, who've also been very inspirational. And I always strongly believe, like you rightly said, collaboration is the key. It's about always bouncing off ideas. It's always about discussing what worked, what did not work, because definitely there are challenges also. Everything comes with a set of challenges,
Yeah.
right? It's not rosy all over. So teachers who are able to walk that path with you, mentors who are able to walk that path with you. So I've been very, very fortunate to have met such people in my career also.
Okay, so we'll just take a short break into. I normally try and sum up the previous. We've spent time about 20 minutes so far, and I'll come back to you. So I'm speaking to Anusha Padmanabhan, and she didn't just sit back and watch what is happening in school, but she actively tried to bring about change in the way that she was teaching the children in class. And she narrated this incident about how she tried teaching them about the digestive system, and the class was absolutely silent, to the point where she asked them to bring their snacks the next day, and then went out and then asked them the question as to what do you think is happening. And that galvanized the entire class into giving a completely different sort of reaction to what she was teaching them, which uh, I think Anusha has gone really deep into understanding whether it's project based learning or sensorial learning or interactive learning. There's a whole lot of things that she works with in her program. And what we're going to do in the next segment is to talk a little more about how this can be implemented not just in schools, but by parents who want their children to understand better. Maths, I thought the example she gave about snakes and ladders, if that's what they understand, then use that to improve their ability to improve and understand maths better. So Back to Anusha. So, Anusha, what are the things that you feel parents can do when they see that their child is disinterested or not showing any signs of curiosity in a particular subject?
Okay. See, one thing as a parent you can do is we all spend our weekends with our children, right? I mean, we
Yeah.
try and do that because through the week we are all swamped with work. Uh, and usually I'm not against people taking them out to eat or, to the mall or something. But probably every week, if we can make time out in our schedule to take them out in nature can be the best teacher, according to me. So it could be as simple as even adding, or could be about learning new vocabulary, anything. Just a walk in nature. It could just be in your neighborhood. You don't need to take your car or your transport and go to a place where you have to hike and all of it. As simple as looking at the number of petals in a flower, as simple as picking up little leaves or something that's fallen on the on the road or something, bring it back home or sit there wherever is comfortable and look at how you could bring in the concepts that the child is learning, because talking and communicating definitely improves their vocabulary, and there is definitely a better there is a emotional connection between a parent and a child, right? So they can talk about their childhood, the child can talk about what happened at school, that also sparks the conversation. Apart from that, how they could use these basic things to teach math can be like adding like a couple of leaves together or subtracting or anything like that, or as simple as taking a chalk and drawing things in their garage or in their terrace together. Could be art, could be something that they learned in school. So the child is actually drawing to express what they learned. If you give them a notebook and a pencil, it's again like going to an art class in school. Instead, they should try to do this in the terrace or the garage with a chalk piece, because children are excited. They're like teachers now. Of course, now chalk pieces have been replaced by board markers and digital pens and all of that. But nothing like holding that powerful chalk piece in a child's hand and draw their learning or express their learning in different ways using that. These are small ways that they can do. Apart from that, like I previously shared, like the snake and ladder, right? Children have a lot of board games at home. If we are able to talk to them while playing board games about whatever they've learned in school and sort of translate that learning also, like how we drew that little multiplication chart like a snake and ladder. There are ways in which parents can also do. Another very popular thing that I see a lot of parents doing is when they go out, either for lunch or dinner or to the mall, sort of show children the car numbers and ask them to add, subtract,
Yeah.
come
That
come
is
up
a
with word
favorite pastime.
problems.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, come up with word problems and all of that. So somewhere it might be informal. It's not like a classroom setting for 40 minutes with a lesson plan and all of that, but the connection between the parent and the child matters the most, and that really helps in learning.
So, what is your take on screens, Anusha? What do you feel? Today's world seems to be more predisposed towards using screens more and more, whereas everything that you have said is get away from screens and improve personal interaction. Do you think that makes a huge difference?
Definitely, it makes a huge difference because now content can be Googled or can
Correct.
be given by AI tools rather, not even Google now.
Yeah.
So, in this constantly changing AI fast paced world, these young children who are full of spark and curiosity, they're anyway going to grow up in this world. And when they become adults, they are going to work in the space and all of that. So, where else do we, sort of tap that curiosity? I'm not against giving screens to children. They can. I mean, there are certain lovely websites online. Generally, when you browse online, you do get a lot of games related to the curriculum that parents can log in along with parental controls and children can play. There are also various YouTube channels that show a lot of experiments, artwork, all of that. So, if parents can limit screen time and use a screen as a friend to take them along the learning journey, then definitely yes, they can use. But then just giving the child an ipad or the computer through the weekend and asking them to study from that or play games in that for a long period of time, that wouldn't work. That personal connection will be lost. So I'm not against screens, but we can limit the time on screens, because
Right.
definitely there's a wealth of resources online also.
And what you spoke about in terms of ensuring that that screen time is used not for spending time, but for actually interacting and going a little deeper. For example, I've noticed that even in restaurants now, it's almost as if parents bring that iPad and that is set up in front of the child, and there's no conversation. It's all the child is involved in that whole thing. And exactly what happens at home, where you have four people at home and they're watching four screens. Here,
Correct.
it's only the adults who are talking. Maybe the objective is also that the adults want to have spend some time talking. And they don't want the child, asking for attention all the time. But what do you think is happening here? Is it that it is become difficult in an attention starved world to be able to take children through that slow process, or have we all got a little more impatient?
I think the second one, we've got a lot more impatient. And I think screens have become a comfort zone also. I mean, we're all so used to watching reels and shorts and all of it. I think it's sort of becoming ingrained in all of us. And when we plan these small, small activities and snap out of the screens for some time, I think we can realize the childhood that we had. I mean, we didn't have screens in childhood, right? I
Screens
mean,
at all.
we grew up on the
Yeah,
roads, we grew up climbing trees, we grew up, outside the house. But children
right.
nowadays miss that. I mean, there is a lot of traffic on the road, there's a lot of construction happening. It's not easy for a child to carry a cricket bat and go play street cricket. That is also becoming increasingly difficult. But like you said, no, the restaurant example. Something that I do with my kids is when we go to a restaurant, I ask them to take the orders from all of us. So from the grandparents, from the parents, or who are friends and all of that. And we carry a little notepad, and with a pencil they make a note of all our orders. They give the orders, so a good amount of 15 minutes as soon as we enter the restaurant is done because they are responsible for ordering, and the kids feel so responsible over there, like, yeah, yeah, I am
Important.
the one
Yeah.
who's ordering. And then if any of us have missed, or not getting our dishes, they go and check, saying, they go to the people at the restaurant who are waiting, asking, hey, we haven't got our soup yet, we haven't got our starters yet, would you be able to check? So it also develops communication, and children learn how to be polite and talk to people. Because in those days, our parents used to give us some money, say, go to the grocery store nearby, now get me some rice, now get me some oil. Today everything is on the click of a button in Blinkit. But these kind of interactions are something our children miss. So every time we go to a restaurant, my husband and I always ensure that the children order. And probably when we are waiting for our meals to come, something that we do is we discuss about it. These are the things we ordered. Now, my children are a little older also now, so they understand what a balanced meal is. So we're like, hey, have we ordered a
Okay.
balanced meal? Of course, indulgence is necessary. We all need to indulge. But do you think you balanced, have we ordered as a family a balanced meal, or do you think we should add something, subtract something? Why do you think we should add that? So we sort of get into a conversation about the food that's going to come. And once the food comes, it's an amazing sensorial experience, right? That's the part of going to a restaurant and looking at the food that's being presented. So we sort of ask our children, hey, so this is how they presented a paneer tikka or a soup and all of that. How else do you think they can present this? Do you have any ideas? How, generally about the restaurant, do you have any ideas about, do you observe so many paintings here? Do you know who's, probably the artist? Why do you think the artist has done this? What would they have had in their mind while painting this? There are so many things that we do with the children when we sit in a restaurant. I'm taking a restaurant as an example because we were just
Yeah. Right.
talking about it,
Right.
as because like you're saying, I see a lot of parents giving their iPads and mobiles to the children, but the environment around you can spark so much of conversation. And language and communication is so important because it strongly makes the children emotionally regulate also, because screens don't do that. Constantly looking at a
Hmm.
screen does not regulate their emotional well-being. This emotional
Very true.
regulation is so important because finally we want to create children who are resilient and empathetic in nature. So these interactions really help in that.
How do you get children to listen? I don't mean listen as in obey. I mean that when you are having a conversation, there is a time when they want to be heard, but they should also learn that conversation is two-way, that I need to listen to the other person, and that is an art in itself. So is there anything that you have thought of as to how you can encourage children to listen to what the others are saying?
Yeah, so we were talking about children listening, right? So children are constantly excited, so they always want to convey something. And as parents and as educators, uh, patience is a virtue, and sometimes patience does thin down. So
Yeah.
I'd say choose your words carefully as an adult. So, for instance, instead of telling a child, "You never listen to me, you have to listen to me," and all that, you can probably choose your words like, "I see that you're very excited, but I do need your attention and your ears for some time." So that way, the child is also emotionally acknowledged and the attention is available. So if we could carefully choose the words that we are using to interact with the child, that will work better in improving their listening skills. Definitely, we have moved away from the generation of children who are used to listening that way. There's a lot of challenges with attention span and all of that that we are facing everywhere. But I think end of the day, everybody requires that, that emotional so about listening.
Yeah.
Uh, I think as children, as when we used to be kids, right, we had to listen mandatory, whether we liked it or not, we had to listen and wait for our turn to speak back. But children nowadays sometimes don't want to wait. They only want to give their opinion. They want to rush. They want to be loud and all of that. So definitely something that helps is observation. Children learn through observation. For ages, this has been true from our times, from our grandparents' times. I'd say learning through observation is the best way to learn to social in terms of social behavior. So how you carefully choose your words, even before you start a conversation with your child, or when you ask your child to speak to somebody, if there could be a few moments that the parent is able to sort of tell the child, this is how a conversation has to be held, why listening is important, or to emotionally acknowledge a child saying, I see that you're very excited, but your ears are so important for this couple of minutes that I have, or, the other person has, because they need you to listen to whatever they are saying, or I need you to listen to what I'm saying. So once they are acknowledged emotionally, their attention is completely available for parents or teachers. But yes, it does require a lot of patience on the part of the parent also.
So, what were the early ways in which you built your company? Or before we do that, let me understand a little more about why you think this is necessary and why you think more people should be getting into something like this, because we are leaving it to schools to do everything, which is not necessarily the case anymore. It doesn't have to be that way. But there is also a point at which this can become interference in schools. So, how do you walk that line?
Talking about Anubhavi and how I started that, right? I was working for schools earlier as an educator in the classroom. And my friend and I sort of realized that somewhere down the line, we had to address those gaps in learning in children. It was becoming a little difficult to, sort of take care of all the children in the classroom at the same time. And learners come in different types, they have different needs, they have different abilities. That is when we decided we will start an after school experiential learning center.
Okay.
And for any child who came to the center, we sort of assess the child to see where their learning is. So we don't look at grade levels, we only look at needs and abilities. We group children with similar needs and abilities, and we work with them on foundational skills, which is numeracy and literacy. Because once the foundations are set, I think there is no looking back as the child goes higher up in the classes. Now, what over the years of running Anubhavi, what I've seen is teachers who I've recruited or who I've worked with, who have come as consultants and all of that, they already have 70 to 80% of the skills that are required. They are curriculum designers, they are learning experience designers, they are good at teacher training, if given the right platform. They can be fantastic facilitators in an after school program. They can be consultants with centers like us, all of that. But it is important to give the right kind of confidence to the teachers who are also coming on board or who you interact with. So that kind of mutual respect should be there within the teaching community. Now, when a child goes back to school, once all this is set, and then you have done that program with them in the evening when the child goes back to school, what parents look for is whether their learning has been translated at school, because they've sent the child to an after school experiential center. The child has gone through the program or is going through a program continuously. Now, is it translating in my academics? That is what the parent looks at.
Right.
95% of the times it has translated for us. I mean, in terms of academic growth, in terms of emotional growth, because something that we do is in a 1 hour class, 45 to 50 minutes might be whatever activities or worksheets or play methods and that we are doing, and 10 minutes of time we spend talking to the child, because child has so much to share about what happened at school, what happened at home, or what he or she is going through. And I feel as a teacher, it's so important to play multiple roles. You have to be there for the child over there as a guide, as a mentor, as a counselor, or just to listen deeply and empathetically. So we spend that good 5 to 10 minutes every class with every child. And that really helps. And then when we see that translating in their personality, it's really magical to see. Apart from the academic aspect, is what I'm talking.
And acceptance. Do you find that children change quite dramatically, or is the change more internal? What have you observed about the children you've worked with?
Again, it varies from child to child. I have one very
Right.
interesting incident from my early years as an educator. I had a child, was very quiet, would never speak in the class, and whatever I did with her, so I spoke about so many different kinds of activity based education. Anything that I did with her, I would get no response. Only with worksheets she would respond. Only with writing, I'll know whether she's understood, but I never know what's running in her mind. So one day during lunch, I told the child, don't go to the ground, come sit with me, you and I will have lunch together and let's talk. Just a chat. Forget that I'm your teacher, don't have any inhibitions, we'll just talk with each other. And we were just talking, and the child then told me that, I am really interested to play the guitar. I love playing the guitar, auntie, and these are the songs that I play over the weekend. So I asked, where do you get to play? I close the door and I play at home. I asked, do you want to play in the class one day? I'd love to spend about 10 minutes listening to you play. I can give that time in my class. I can make up for it later. She was very reluctant initially. I said, no issues at all. I'll speak to your parents, I'll speak to the school, I'll get you the time. So in next week in one of my classes, she came up, she played the guitar, and it was so liberating for her, I tell you. I mean, after that, I saw the child had changed so much. She started to talk. There were other children who were coming and talking to her saying, hey, you play the guitar so well. Do you think you can teach us? And there were so many conversations around that guitar and music. And this was not even an academic movement. That moment was not even meant as a learning goal, as a lesson plan, none of it. It was just giving that kind of confidence to that child. And as a young educator at that point of time, I didn't expect that this would change so much that today she runs a band of her own. She performs on stage, and she still writes to me saying, hey, auntie, you gave me that 10 minutes that day, and that really changed my life. She started to play for the school assembly, for the school, annual days, all of that. And this is something that stuck to me, saying, some children, the change happens immediately. For some, it does take time. They internalize, and then you start to observe. They don't show it out in their speech or in their communication. But as an educator, as a parent, you start observing in their behavior that changes do happen. For some, it's organic and it's slow, but for others, it's just overnight.
Okay. So we'll go to the summary. I'm speaking to Anusha Padmanabhan, and in the last segment, she spoke about how she works with children and what are the kind of changes that she sees, and the origin of the entire program as to how she began uh, applying this to students, for activities which were post the school time, and then managed to draw a whole lot of them out and get to understand what exactly was happening. I asked her if the changes were temporary or permanent, and she spoke of how it varies from child to child. Again, each child has their own specific ways of responding. An interesting part was how the entire move away from screens into actual interactions is necessary for children to get far more of the real world rather than just believe that everything can happen on a screen. And that, I think, is one of the fundamental changes that she's helping to bring about, because these are the things which will go on to help the child and parents much far more in future. So if you've liked what you've listened to so far, please share, subscribe, like, and tell more people about this, because the whole idea of doing the show is to help you understand what careers need not be along the old beaten path. And today's career, Anusha's career, is basically into education, but she's not a teacher in the conventional sense of the word. And that's what we'll be discussing in the last segment, the kind of impact she hopes to have and where is this going in future. So, Anusha, you have taken this. Do you see this happen across several schools? Have you heard of similar organizations? And if there is somebody who's interested in taking this up as a career, what is it that they should be doing?
Right. So there are a lot of progressive schools today, both preschools and primary schools. I'm talking about preschool and primary school because that is the major age, right? Between 3 to 11 is the age
Right.
where you can tap, children the right way. There are several after-school learning centers like Anubhavi, which are also working on foundational literacy and numeracy as such. There are learning labs, there are innovation hubs, there are homeschooling cohorts and schools, which is a new thing in our education system, where there are about 3 4 schools in Chennai also where homeschoolers come together and gather. Then there are curriculum design teams across edtech. There are NGOs working on child development and activity based learning. There are parent education programs, and most importantly, there are teacher trainers out there who can actually train you in activity based learning or play based education or innovation in education. So there are so many career opportunities out there for teachers who actually want to dabble in this a little bit. Like how I collectively said. And there are a lot of workshops and trainings that are happening across, there are online workshops, there are teachers who do it along with, institutions where one can go and equip themselves in these 21st century skills. By 21st century skills, what I mean is teachers just need to have certain key skills before they go to any workshop or any teacher training. One is the curiosity to learn, be a lifelong learner, have the empathy towards people, believe that you can unlearn what you've learned so far, and most importantly, facilitation over instruction. So with that kind of mindset, with that kind of growth mindset, those are the only skills that are required, and these are skills that are something that you can adapt by yourself, right? So with this skill set, if they are able to get themselves trained, then they can use this in their classroom or start their own enterprises, like what I said, like after school centers, innovation hubs, homeschooling cohorts, and all of that. So there are two sides to it: either take it up as a career in school, apply it in your classroom, or become a play based or innovative educator as an entrepreneur. Now, there are also several courses that they can do. For instance, there are two courses that I did this year that I'd like to talk about. One was design thinking and innovation, and the other was six bricks methodology. So, design thinking opens a world of opportunities for teachers, because that is a shift in mindset. Like I said, it's a complete shift in mindset, the way we think, and these are things that even your grandmother can apply, even you can apply in your kitchen. This is not just restricted to the classroom. You can apply to your personal life, you can apply to your professional life, everywhere. It's a beautiful concept, and there are many schools which are starting to adapt this and come out as design thinking schools with that framework in their lesson plans. There are a few schools in India that are doing that. And the second course that I did is the six bricks methodology from an Irish college, which is online. Now, both these courses were online, so I did it in the comfort of my home. I didn't have to go anywhere and learn, right? So, the six bricks methodology, where you use just six Lego Duplo bricks of six different colors, and how you can use it across numeracy, literacy, proprioception, movement for young learners as young as 3 to 6 year olds till about grade 8. It's very magical to know that there are just 6 blocks required and you can translate learning beautifully in the classroom. I've dabbled with a few myself at my center, but these are two courses that I did this year to equip myself to, because I strongly believe being a lifelong learner will only get you where you are. So these are two courses that work for me this year. There are many courses like this also where teachers can, do those courses. And
You have spent the better part 15, 16 years, like you said. So, from the earliest, the children who you started out with, what are their educational paths? And they must have grown quite big compared to where they were. So, what are the
correct.
changes you have seen? Have you had a chance to meet some of them later on and see what they're like?
Yeah, and it's so heartwarming to meet your children that you work with, because you only remember them in the classroom as little ones, and you see them grow up, right? And then after a point of time they
Yeah,
leave school, they go up, like you're saying, they grow up to take their own careers. They're either abroad or they're here. But when you go for those alumni meets, or when you bump into them at a cafe or on the road, even when I'm talking I'm getting goosebumps, or when you bump into parents of those children and they quickly say, hi Anushanti, let me do a video call, and you should see how much he's grown. And then you see them
yeah,
all grown up with their voices were so soft and now it's so different. But it's very heartwarming, those moments. And most of the children that I've taught, they are in different kinds of careers, varied careers in design, in tech, in fintech, in architecture. They've just dabbled around, and it's beautiful to see them, grow up to be what they are and do what they are passionate about. I think that is something that is also available today as informed parents, that we are able to support our child with the right kind of education. We're able to support them with what they are passionate about, and then they take it up
right,
as a career.
right.
But when if one common thing that I've always heard from all these children, Auntie, I will never forget that one lesson that you taught me in that class. There's always that. In my 12th standard farewell, they asked me who my favorite teacher was, and I said your name. These are little things that make you feel so good. Like, yeah, really, you remembered me in the farewell. I taught you in third grade, and you still remembered me in 12th grade.
And that is the amazing bit, that the teacher is never going to know the kind of effect that she will have on one student in her classroom, because that particular thing that they have taken out of uh, whatever you taught them is life changing for them in ways that they themselves could not have imagined when they started off. And this, I think, is the wonderful part of interacting with children and allowing them to do exactly what uh, encourage them to think for themselves, because very often it's the exact opposite. So is this again is it can apply only to a very, very small set of students, unfortunately, Anusha, because we're still grappling with how do you manage to influence education when you move from the urban centers to, even within urban centers, to government schools where most of these things are completely out of their reach. So is there a way that some of this can reach those students as well, and then they see how these kind of changes can impact them?
Yeah. I do understand what you're saying. The change has to be in the policy level, where you're
Yeah,
making the change to the system. But again, it is also very challenging to make that kind of big change at a very short period of time. This can happen over a
right,
couple of years or something. But something that probably there are nowadays. I see a lot of NGOs, a lot of students, a lot of teachers go out and work with government school students on play-based education, on interactive education, and all of that. And those children also get that kind of exposure. Something that I did this year, for instance. So there's a neighborhood school here. It's a government school, And I felt somewhere I had to make a difference in society at some point of time. So I walked into that school. I met the headmistress. I spoke to her. She was very welcoming. She's like, uh, Anusha, the biggest challenge that we are facing is communication. We have all the necessary equipment to teach them. The teachers are well equipped. There are lesson plans. Everything is set, but our children are not confident enough and they're not able to communicate. Is there something that you can do it, in that aspect? So I went to the classroom and I sort of did like a one-on-one interaction with each child. So the class was going on. I told the teacher, I'll take one period of your time. Can you send one child out, each child out? And when you talk to them, there is so much of fire. There is so much of fire to learn. But they're like, I'm not very confident in talking in English, miss. Can you help me with that? And that is something I saw, in common with all of them. And that's when I decided, okay, let me work with the school here to see if I could come up with a program where I'm interacting with them regularly, helping them build their communication skills. And I did that for a couple of weeks, couple of months. It worked out beautifully. I mean, even now I see those children going back home on the road. They're like, "Hi, Anusha, miss, how are you?" and all that. It's very cute to see them. But something that I found when I worked with them is the government has a fantastic program called Yennum Eluttum, at least the government here, where this was rolled out sometime in 2002 or 2022 or 23. It's a numeracy and literacy program
Okay.
where books, workbooks, lesson plans, manuals, everything is given. All the necessary items required for the different activities are given. Teaching learning materials are given. Everything is in place. So the teacher who I interacted with there, she showed me for her classroom what all different TLMs she had. And there is even an app where we
Sorry,
could go
what is
and
a TLL?
TLM is teaching learning material.
Okay.
Yeah. So
Okay.
there's an app where she went there and you could actually search and, take out your lesson plan. So this is the topic you're teaching. And it says from the time you go and stand in your classroom till the end of the 40th minute, what you could do. And the beauty of that program was it sort of catered to every kind of learner. So there are children who are gifted, there are children who are, in different spectrums of learning, right? But they had instructions for every kind of learner, worksheets differentiated for every kind of learner, for visual, for kinesthetic children, for auditory children, different types of learning, different types of learning speeds, learning styles, all of it, everything was in place. All you had to do is use that in your classroom. And the teacher told me that they have regular, every term the teachers have workshops and training programs where they go, they learn how to use these materials, how to use these lesson plans in the classroom. And I thought this was so revolutionary to come up with a numeracy
Yeah.
literacy program, because someone like me who's running an Anubhavi, I cater to a certain section of the society. Some children come to me, some of them know about me. Like you said, it's not a change that I'm making throughout the city or something, but if the government is able to come up with such programs, then you're making a difference in the lives of so many children. And they have this program till I think grade 5, if I'm not wrong. It's for the primary, but I and it's there across the different subjects. And I think that that's a great initiative that they are doing. That's something that I learned this year when I went and volunteered at the school nearby.
Okay. Great. As a teacher, what have you observed that there's this constant complaint that children today are not reading as much as they used to, they're not writing as much as they used to. How do you improve those skills, or how do you bring about interest in something where you just have to read text off a page or listen? Or do you feel that a child will have their own ways of figuring out how to learn about something? Or do you think that there is some involvement necessary and help necessary to get them going?
Yeah. So I think reading is a very important skill. There are certain primary skills that you can't remove out of education. As
Right.
much as you want to do innovative teaching strategies in the classroom, reading and writing cannot be compromised, right? So
Right.
something we can do is create a small classroom library. All of us have access to libraries, whether private or in the school. So the thing is, every school has like a timetable where there is one class in a week called the library class, where the child goes. reads a book, comes back. But what I see is that we don't close the learning circle. Children can go to the library in that one period, pick a book and read. But are we coming back probably during the English class or during the class teacher's time? Are we interacting with the students asking, hey, what did you read and what did you like about the book? What did the front cover, what did you think of the cover? Did you like the design? What was in your mind when you first flipped and read the first two pages? Small questions, just 5 minutes of interaction where the child is sort of curious, and then child is also given a chance to talk in the class, right? The teacher is asking you a question. The teacher is interested in you. She wants to know what you read, right? So the
Yes.
child goes back the next week to the library, picks the book, reads, and is eagerly waiting for that session with the teacher where he or she can talk about that book. That is one thing that teachers can do. Now, in the classroom, if possible, the teacher can have like a small corner and pick up books from the library or from a personal collection or from a district library, wherever, put those books there. When children finish their worksheets or their classwork or their activities or their games well ahead of time, children can be given a chance to read a book. Now, you should also tell the children that the activity, because children are like, okay, okay, now I get a chance to read a book. Let me finish this in 5 minutes and just give it off. Kids will think that way, right? So you'll have
Yeah.
to lay down the rules saying, hey, give your best, finish the activity, finish the worksheet, finish your studying, whatever. I will give you time to read a book from the classroom library. So, otherwise, what happens is in the class, when children sort of finish, especially with activity based learning, let's say there are 4 or 5 groups working together, like on different aspects, and there are 2 groups that have finished, and those 8, 9 children will be running around, and they'll be, poking the other children with a pencil or just, clowning around in the class, and the teacher will be like, okay, how do I manage the classroom now? This is something they can do. They can pick their favorite book. Children can also bring their own books and keep it in the library. So they can read, and probably by the end of that fifth or the 10th minute, the child can be asked to write one line or one word about what they felt, what impact did those few pages make on them, who was their favorite character, anything, whatever comes to their mind, sort of like a reflection after they read, and drop it in a little cardboard box that the teacher has on her table saying, hey, this is my learning for today. So that is something they can do to promote reading. Of course, parents reading bedtime stories, time immemorial. Read before bedtime. 20 minutes of reading, 15 minutes of reading. Just asking the child to read alone will not work. The parent has to either sit with the book of their own book or sit along with the child and read. It has to be either of the two, or a good combination, because sometimes we really don't know if the child is reading and comprehending what they are reading. So a parent is able to intervene here and there, interact with them, tell them, hey, so this is see, there are so many books. For instance, there are very old authors like Enid Blyton, which we would have read as a child. The child is also reading now. Say, hey, this is one book that I read in my 4th grade. How do you like it? This is what I thought when I was in 4th grade. Little interactions like that. Or pick a book of your choice, an adult book that you can read, and your child reads their book. So that again, they learn through observations. These are little things that you can do to, sort of bring
Encourage
reading as
learning.
a
Yeah.
habit. Reading
True.
is very important. Now, when it comes to writing, uh, like we were discussing now, everything is in the click of the button. Everybody wants to type. Even young children want to type because they are used to seeing their parents typing and working and all of that, because all our jobs are on the computer now. So writing as a skill, I also find that children don't actually really like to write. So that way, worksheets have been revolutionary. Earlier, it only used to be notebooks, write paragraphs and paragraphs and paragraphs. But now worksheets, which are designed in a way that questions, sort of evoke curiosity. So it should also not be questions which are just rote memory and then writing. If we are able to come up with interesting questions, where children reflect on their learning, where children are able to think out of the box, then automatically they would love to write as a skill, apart from the rote. So about 70% to 60% of rote memory and about 30-40% of these kind of questions, children want to do it. Or you could probably tell them that, hey, if you're done with your worksheet or your notebook, I'll give you a crossword, or I'll give you time to do whatever. Like how I told you, I discussed with the child, and she learned how to, she sort of played the guitar in front of the whole class. That was her interest.
Right.
Now, every child in your class will have an interest. In the beginning of your class, you collect this little form where you know the parent's name, what they do, child allergies, and all that. Along with that, I feel there should be a column where the children should be allowed to pen their interests down, their hobbies or something, for the teacher to holistically understand the child. So if there's a child who's done with his writing work, with his or her writing work, then if you're, let's say a child is interested in cricket, right? If there's something that the teacher can come up with a small activity or a small card, or just give a small paper and say, hey, can you write 2 facts about cricket that you like? That's all. You don't need to prepare for this at all. You just need to know your child properly. That is one way to make them, sort of fall in love with writing, or rather help them finish their task in writing.
Express themselves with writing. Yeah, that's
Correct,
true.
correct.
Great. So, in conclusion, Anusha, what is it that you would advise someone who's looking at this as a career to do? That is, where should they begin? Because what you have just outlined is that you need not be a teacher in the conventional sense of the word within classrooms. You can also explore a role outside. So, what do you think are the qualities necessary, and how is it that people who are interested can leverage their interest?
Yeah. So, innovation is only about thinking differently. It's how well you're able to connect with your students. So, always have an open mind. Go to your classroom, or wherever you're working, with an open mind. Whether you work as a teacher trainer with adults, whether you work as an after school program facilitator, whether you work as a teacher in a school, wherever you are, have an open mind to learn. Remember that you're a learner every single day. So these 30, 40 children who are sitting in front of you, or those 5 kids who are sitting in front of you, they are learners in paper. But remember that
Yeah.
in your mind, you are also a lifelong learner. And it is important to handhold every child, facilitate learning in a way that children grow up to be extremely empathetic, resilient, flexible learners. So, for that, I think a teacher has to have the willingness to learn and unlearn herself. That's the most important skill. That is more than enough. Of course, teachers have their degrees. There are different, colleges that offer teacher training degrees. All of that, we're all equipped with that. We've all studied to become teachers. But if there's the willingness to learn, I think any teacher can crack it in a classroom.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for coming on the show, Anusha. I'll just request you to stay on for a minute while I wrap the whole thing up, and then I'll come back to you and just have a short conversation. Thank you.